Welcome to Batpixel. This is the Powkiddy V90 retro gaming handheld. And I've been playing around with this thing all week and it's really cool. It's pretty cheap. It's about 40 bucks American. There's a few things that you can do to this to make it way better, so I'll go over that in the video. But first let's just unbox it and see what you get inside. So when you open it up, there's a little note that says before you shut the system down, you should shut it down in the software first and then shut it off with the button, so then the memory card isn't corrupted. So this is the main face of the console. It says Powkiddy right here. If I lay it down flat, on the bottom you got your charge port and a headphone jack. And on the side here you got a micro SD port and a power button. On the other side there's volume control. On the back you got R1, R2, L1, L2 bumper buttons, and the battery on the bottom. But you open this up and it's like an old Game Boy SP. And you got two speakers here, D-pad, menu button, start and select, but you get 4 buttons on the inside like Super Nintendo. Another nice feature with this is that it shuts down to conserve battery, so if you want to wake it up, just hit the menu button. If you don't do that, it will shut off after a while. You have to physically shut it off and just turn it back on again. This menu button will actually suspend your power as well, so you can save battery life. Underneath the plastic tray, you've got a white charger. So it's got a normal USB plug into one of those blocks that you get with an iPhone or something. And this is USB-C that plugs into the console. It comes with some instructions on how to start the games up and exit games, but if you're familiar with emulators, you'll have no problem with this. So let's have a look at what's preloaded on here when you get it out of the box. So the device comes with a bunch of apps on it, but you can use the bumpers to go across the menus to a game menu that's already preloaded. You got Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Famicom, Super Famicom, etc. You got Sega Genesis. There's games on here as far as PS1, but they got some MAME arcade games on here as well. So right out of the box you have a lot of Nintendo games. There's a lot of Sega and arcade games on here that you'd probably like to play, but I'd still recommend putting your own software on here and put your own games on this, because then you'll have what you want. And the emulators on this are not the best. They kind of slow down, especially the Super Nintendo emulators, so I'll show you how to install custom firmware in this video. Some games won't work on this. I'm here trying to play Galaga, and it tries to load up, but it brings me back to the menu. They have some other types of games on here, like Quake 1 for example. And the last tab over is where you can go into your settings or your scan. And this is where you have to turn the power off before you manually switch it off. But yeah, the buttons feel really good. They're nice and clicky. The only problem I've had is where the D-pad pushes all the way down like that. I'll show you how to fix that later in this video. The first thing you should fix with this is the sound. The sound is really bad. It sounds like it's playing out of a tin can, like almost like you literally put this in a can and you can hear the audio coming out of it. It's really not that great, but there's an easy fix. As long as you have a soldering iron, you can fix this in a couple of minutes and it sounds way better. Start by removing the battery pack. And we're going to remove these 4 screws. So here's the speaker that I modified. You see how this speaker is red and black? This one also used to be red and black, but I just switched them over. So now it's black and red. So because this is different than this one, it makes the sound a lot better. My second major recommendation is definitely upgrade the software and put your own emulators and your own games that you want on there. But don't use the micro SD card that comes with it. I just picked up a micro SD scan disc and it was pretty cheap, and I'll show you how to do that in this video too. First you're going to want to go to retrogamehandhelds.com and click on Devices, then Retro. And scroll down until you find the Powkiddy V90. Make sure you download the Powkiddy V90 software, and you'll also need to download the Partition Wizard and the Windows Image Writer. And optional downloads are 7-zip if you need to unzip folders, and a card formatter if you have information on your SD card. Open up your Windows Disk Imager and find your Powkiddy V90 software that you downloaded. And make sure that your scan disk device is selected. In my case it was the D drive. And it'll warn you for an error. Just say OK and continue and let it do its thing. The second step is to open your partition software and right click on your FAT and click extend. And don't change anything, it depends on the size of your disk, but just say OK and let it go through the process. So this is my old micro scan disk that came with the console, and this is my new scan disk that we just put our software on. So let's plug this in and I'll show you how it's set up. You can go through the top menus. There's applications. I use this to get into MAME Arcade. I'll show you here. When I go into Explorer, I'll go down to emulators, and MAME is down here. I recommend in MAME for the video aspect, make sure that you have scale aspect on, because if you're playing Pac-Man, it might be stretched too far. So putting on scale aspect will bring it back down to where it needs to be. You can see the arcade games work just fine on this. If we go back over to our emulators tab, you can see there's all kinds that you just installed. I'd recommend using Powkiddy for Super Nintendo because it runs the games better. If you find there's any games that don't run in here very well, you can try it on the other one. Now I'm going to show you how to get this to run the games for Super Nintendo. All of these emulators have to be directed to where your game ROMs are, so I'll just show you how I did that. If I go into this emulator, if I hit this little up option, here's my ROM folders. So if I go down to Super Nintendo, I'll go in here, and now I can find my games. It'll save that directory so you don't have to do it again. This games tab came with a bunch of other games that I never put on here. When you install it, you'll probably have the same ones. I'm going to show you something with this too. My Game Boy emulators were only playing my Game Boy ROMs, but I wanted this to play Game Boy Color. So I'll show you the same way. You go in and you just go up to the top and you find your Game Boy Color folder. This usually opens up the menu, but in some emulators you have to hit select and start to open the menu. The third thing is an easy fix. I found that when I'm playing Super Mario World or something like that, when I'm moving the D-pad, the whole D-pad kind of presses down. So when I had Yoshi, for example, and I was running left and right, sometimes I was crouching and I didn't mean to, and I was like crouching a lot, and it's because the whole D-pad kind of presses down. So in order to fix that, you can just take it apart and take a little tiny chunk of tape. So you can layer up some tape really small and tape it to the middle of the D-pad, and then the D-pad will have something to pivot on. So I did that and it was an easy fix. I just layered up 10 pieces of Scotch tape and taped it to the back of the battery cover first. So to get this little ribbon cable out, you have to flip this black part up and then haul this out. Make sure to remove your power switch over here too. You want to be careful with your speaker wires here, so just flip this over this way. And here's the D-pad that we're going to be fixing, okay? So your menu button's up here and your D-pad's here. See how the tape kind of creates like a little square piece of plastic? I found it easier to stick the piece of tape on the motherboard so that it'll stay there when you're reassembling it. Yeah, I can already tell that the D-pad's a lot better. You can see I'm running back and forth on Yoshi and he's not crouching anymore. That's because the tape's allowing the D-pad to pivot. So the fourth thing that I recommend, you don't really have to do it, but if you find that you're playing this a lot and you want a better battery life, obviously you can upgrade the battery to get a better one that'll last longer. That's totally optional. If you do the first three things I showed you, this will be great. You'll really like this thing. There is a screen protector on here, and people have recommended to take the screen protector off because when it's powered off, you can see little bubbles on the edges, but to be honest with you, when I turn this on and play a game, I can't notice it at all. I don't even see it, so I'm just going to leave mine on. It doesn't affect me. I do have links down in the descriptions if you want to pick one of these up or upgrade the battery or pick yourself up a scan disc. I got different sizes down in the links too. So if you haven't already and you're into retro gaming, hit that subscribe button and like the video and share it out there if you think anyone will like it. Thanks for tuning in.